In this brand new series, I take a tier 1 meta deck that has been thrust into the spotlight either from a ban list or because of insane new support from a recent set that features a full-on deck profile, deck analysis with all the math behind the deck, combo guides and live test hands, a run at an event, whether that's a regional, case tournament, YCS, or any other event to showcase how it stacks up against the top meta decks, as well as a full counter guide for everything you need to know on how to beat that deck. In this 4-part series, the first top tier meta strategy I will showcase is Kashtira. This is Meta Sheep. What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to YGOPD, and thank you for coming back to the second episode of Meta Sheep. In this episode, I am going to do a bit of a deck analysis. If you've seen any of my prior deck analysis, you know I typically go through the deck itself, a little bit more in-depth in terms of text, deck choices, a bit of a couple basic combo guides, some test hands, and specifically a lot of math behind how the deck is built, how the ratios are, and how it works out to guarantee that you're going to have good hands every single time. So with all that said, we're not going to waste a lot of time. We'll include our public sub shoutouts in our regular Sunday series normally, and this series will go ahead and be moved to Thursdays. I found that's a little bit easier for me to record during the week on Thursday, makes it a little bit lighter. So with all that said, we'll go ahead and start by hopping into the general deck and tech choices. Okay, to talk a little bit about the deck ratios and that kind of piece in the deck, I'll go ahead and hover over a few different pieces here. Of course, there's the Kashtira package, depending on what names you want. I've included everything here except for preparations, just because it seems like people are shying away from that just a bit. But again, you can use Fenrir, Unicorn, Scareclaw Cash, Tier Clash, and Rise Heart. Those are all the standards. Ogre and Preparations seem to be a bit of a toss-up per build. Then you obviously have Birth, Theosis, Planet, and Big Bang. Any combinations of that are fairly standard. If you want to see my build, again, I will plug the first episode of Meta Sheep where I did the full deck profile as well as the extra deck and the side deck that you can check out. It is right here on screen, as well as the link in the description. Feel free to check that out. But I'll talk about a few different categories for deck choices and techs and things like that. The first one are different types of engines or pieces that offer you kind of protection. And I'm going to talk a few about right here. So starting off, I think the king of all of those is Ibli. This has been the one that has been the mainstay staple for almost everyone, mostly in the side. Some builds even main it. You saw this obviously quite a bit at YCS Las Vegas. Fog King is obviously a close second, not really too great. Same thing with Mushroom Man number 2, but if you don't feel like paying $20 plus a copy for Iblis, even the Ultras, those two are definitely really solid. Or if you kind of shelved your adventure package for quite a while and are wondering where it can go, this is a really good fit for it. Of course, that does dedicate about 10 slots to your main deck. And then the last one that is kind of 50-50 on how it pops up is Forbidden Lance. I really see people split on this. I think for bigger long-term events, this is definitely a really good pick. But if you're just running back at locals, you might want something a little bit more covering like Ibli to deal with stuff or the adventure package. But those are your primary tools to utilize to kind of help insulate your boards going first. Ibli and Fog King also definitely help out to stop Nib. Same thing with the adventure package. And then Mushroom Man number 2 obviously helps deal with the mirror match. And Forbidden Lance is just kind of an all-around, mainly for the kind of going second feature to dodge things like Dark Ruler, Lightning Storm, Dark Hole, any of those types of things. Book of Eclipse is probably the biggest one that comes to mind for a lot of folks. So after that, I will talk a little bit about the consistency pieces and extenders you can choose to run. First is Small World. I'm pretty sure you've probably seen by now on MST TV's build. If you've not checked that out, I believe he's created some really good Small World bridges on how to get to certain things like Lava Golem and pieces like that for going first or second. If you want to run Small World and you have the spots already in it, it's definitely not a bad choice. Sacred Sword of the 7 Stars is also not a bad choice either to be able to draw 2. However, I think these both pale in comparison to Prosperity. Prosperity, I think, is the objective best pick for consistency. However, if you're not totally sold or you don't want to shell out the 40 or however much it is now per copy, you can lean back on a couple of these, or even a cute tech that some people do that is very, very budget, that is Planet Pathfinder, to get you an extra copy of that field spell up to 3, which is a really, really powerful card. Of course, it clears itself, so that way you can still Kashtira afterwards. Some of the older techs in terms of consistency was Psybeast, Astral Karibo, and the Ascended of Thunder. These aren't really being used too much now, but are still available to you if you want to build it. These are all really good techs if you have them laying around and you have some of the Kashtira stuff, but not all of it, and want to still experiment and get some experience with it. These are definitely great plugins until you get the rest of the core. Now, for the rest of it, is going to be kind of the same category, but overall different kinds of board breakers, going second cards, and that kind of thing, as well as maybe just general defensive slots. Okay. Resyncing at the randomize button in 3, 2, 1. Starting off, we have Lava Golem. This is pretty straightforward. I don't think much really needs to be said about this. This is like the ultimate cash card at this point. You are almost always maining it, if not siding it at the bare minimum. Similar to Nib, unless you're kind of afraid of cards like Crossout and that kind of stuff. Maybe you relegate it to the side, but Nib is one of our mainstays, as well as Sphere Mode is probably the mainstay in your side if you are not already utilizing a card like Lava Golem. Chaos Hunter is definitely a solid card for the mirror. The only unfortunate thing is it can be taken, right, with tactics or thrust into tactics, and it's a level 7, so it can be utilized a lot in the mirror, but it just depends on your preference. But if you want to stop a deck like Flu because you're sick of it, this is a great tech that gives you an extra body to have some work with. And then obviously Dimension Shifter. Some people are still on this on the side because in reality, on top of Rise Heart, this just destroys every single rogue deck in the format. It really does quite a lot. And then, of course, your main board breakers of the format in the form of Evenly Matched and Book of Eclipse. Not much to say about those. And then, depending on how you want to go hard on the Banish mechanic, there is still Dimensional Fissure and Macrocosmos now at 3 to be utilized. And then the rest of these are more general board breakers or cards you might see a little bit more in the side, some in the main. But Raigeki, Dark Ruler, Dark Hole, pretty standard board breakers moving forward. Not that good against cash because you can have protection for things like Infinite Track Goliath, as well as the Shangri-La protects itself. And then we have Mind Control, Change of Heart, probably two of the most powerful cards right now at one-ofs, especially in the mirrors. To be able to take something of them, slapping a Rise Heart on it yourself is just really insane. Same thing with Thrust and Tactics, depending on how you want this. These can either be in the main or in the side at some ratio. My build currently does 2 and 2. And then depending, Enemy Controller is also a really, really cool card that has been seeing a lot of play that I really, really enjoy in a few other builds. This particularly in my Kashtira Sword Soul build, if you've not checked that out, does a lot of work. It's really, really solid. And then the last card I put here is Raid Raptor Napalm Dragonius. I'm pretty sure people have seen this, but for people who still really want to get some mileage out of the Arsenal Falcon line, you can utilize this to special summon this card as a way to help deal damage in time. Does 600 damage and turns off monster effects for the rest of the turn. Not bad, but definitely a lot of work. But if it's something that time is just, you're really concerned about it, this is an option for you. Okay, and now moving on to the extra, I'll talk a little bit about the general slots of what you're going to see, as well as maybe a few extra spare slots that you have not used before. Starting off, also the Earth Charmer is one that has been slowly creeping back up. Again, you saw this in the recent YCS as a way to help deal with cards like Contact C, and just isn't in general good card in the mirror to be able to steal a Fenrir or different things like that. Still definitely a solid card. If you're that concerned, it's worth dedicating a slot to. Zeus obviously needs no introduction, just a mainstay staple in the deck. Same thing with Shangri-La and a Rise Heart, pretty straightforward there, along with the Diablosis, the Mind Hacker. Big Eye and Dracosac are kind of 50-50, I would say, in text if you want to dedicate a slot to it. Between the two, I would lean a little bit more towards Big Eye than Dracosac, but Dracosac also applies to the FTK if you're unfamiliar with that, getting double tokens to make Cherubini. It's essentially a line that gets you straight into Kali Yuga. Not very consistent, pretty frail to hand traps, and doesn't allow much follow-up, so I didn't really include it here, but felt it was at least worth mentioning. Harmonizer fell in favor just a bit, given Tier has kind of fell off the map. If it does come back, especially with Branded or different things like that, this is still a semi-decent card. Can stop the Branded in red play if you are interested, but it's not a bad card by any means. Red Eye's Flare is obviously the built-in Dex way to deal with time. That's probably even better than Arsenal Falcon without having to dedicate a side or a main deck slot. So if you're really looking for something, this is probably your best option. Dark Armed is okay. It adds some pops and spot removal, helps trigger a few different things. Not bad, but ultimately not many people play it, but I think it's still definitely a solid underrated tech that can be utilized. And then for the links, pretty straightforward, but Goliath is what offers your Arise Heart protection by detaching it to it, or attaching it to it, sorry, when it's banished face down by your own effects, gains that effect, which is really, really nice. And then Donner and Lingaribo are pretty much known at this point, but again, is helping to deal with Ibli, and then Almirage as well to help with Ibli. I'll specify this in the most simple way I can for people that continue to ask. Almirage is for when you start with Ibli, Lingaribo and Donner are for when they give you Ibli. Really all there is to it. And then the last card I'll talk about that I personally am a big fan of dedicating at least one slot to in the main deck is one of the Pearly Happiness. Basically, you detach and it negates all other face-up monsters your opponent controls, which is really, really good until the end of the turn. Yes, they can respond to it because you don't have Pearly stuff under it. However, for decks that might make, like, say, Sprite, that make untargetable, undestructible Avramax, that's a really good way to turn that off and then be able to bounce it with a card like Arise Heart, banish it, sorry. But it really does help kind of niche and turn off certain problematic monsters. I really do like it and would recommend it. So the last couple techs, depending on what you're utilizing, if you're unfamiliar with it, is Raid Raptor, Arsenal Falcon. Again, I talked about for time since the barrier statue is now gone. Titanic Moth is another card that is dedicated for time. Control no other monsters that can attack directly, but the battle damages have, not a big deal if you're going for time, or for Zeus since it just attacks direct. And then when it inflicts battle damage, you detach and inflict 500 damage to your opponent for each card in their hand. Definitely a decent tech if you're looking for time. If you for some reason can't find this at your locals, but they have one of these sitting in your bulk, definitely a good thing to pick up as a easy replacement slot till you find a Red Eyes Flare Metal. And then the last couple cards I just wanted to mention is some people are still on hand traps as opposed to board breakers, and if you're on that, the best bet is recommending level 3 hand traps that are tuners, so you can utilize the Baron line. Pretty straightforward there, but not much to say about it. So that is kind of overall in general just an idea of the techs, choices, ratios, decks. I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but overall in terms of choices and options you have, I think this does a really good job of showcasing it. If there are cards that you are a fan of that I have not covered in here, please comment and let me know. I will definitely heart that and respond to that and make sure to give that a shout out. So with all that said, we'll go ahead and transition and talk a little bit about the math of the deck. All right, I always like when I have the chance to highlight a deck that has really good math behind it, just because that's something I'm passionate about. I was a math teacher before, and I really do enjoy highlighting that for this deck. And this deck is no exception. It is a really, really powerful deck in how it's built. Again, if you want to see the full profile, go ahead and take a look on my channel. Again, link is in the description. It is the first episode of Meta Sheep. And for the math in particular, I have a shot on screen here of just the Kashtira piece of the deck as well as Prosperity, just for talking points. But again, if you want to see the whole deck profile, please go check that out. This is a 40 card list, and then I'll kind of talk about everything, starting with the Kashtira cards as a whole and then drilling down. So the Kashtira card specifically is built in a unique way. There are 23 Kashtira cards in the main deck. This does not include Prosperity. That means in your 5-card hand, in your 40-card deck going first, you have at least a 90% chance of hitting 2 of those Kashtira cards, so having 2 of those names, meaning that Scareclaw Cash or Tear Clash are always going to be live. That's very, very important, and you have the 99% chance of hitting at least 1 cash name. So no matter what, your Tear Cash, your extenders that require an extra card are fine. That's something I really want to emphasize. The second piece are your summonable cash names. These are, Fenrir, Unicorn, Arise Heart, all those. There's 16 of them, right? And then that means you have a 93.5% chance, or say 94%, of hitting at least one of those in your opening hand, meaning that Theosis is always going to be live. So again, your extenders are always going to be live. Theosis is always going to be live, which is absolutely nuts. And then last, on moving down further, are the cash starters. So these are cards that actually get your engine started, make plays, can generate interrupts, all that good stuff. That is mainly your Fenrir, your Unicorn, your planets, and your terraforming. There are 10 of those, and then you can include Prosperity in that if you want. So 13 total of those gives you an 87% chance of hitting a starter, which is not bad. For me, if I can make it happen, 14 is typically the magic number. That's what hits you the 90% chance of hitting one of those 14 in a 5-card hand. For the going second cards, again, we're in a similar vein to the amount of starters. We have 13 going second cards. That's obviously in my build. Lava Golem, Evenleys, that kind of thing. Again, if you want to check that out, please check that out. And then after that, we include the 3 Prosperity as well, bumping that up to 16, meaning we have, again, another 87% chance of hitting one without Prosperity, and a 93.5% chance of hitting one with Prosperity. So again, that 94%, which is really, really solid. And then the last category I just want to mention are general consistency / extender cards. That's, again, if you want to lump this a little bit differently, your spells like Field Spell, Theosis, Tactics, both Tactics, Terraforming, Planet, Prosperity, all that kind of stuff. That gets you right around 17. That's basically a 95% chance of seeing one of those. So basically the way the deck is built, your extenders are always going to be live. You're almost always going to hit a summonable cache, and you're almost always going to have a extender to utilize, as well as at least one going second card. The deck was built with that math in mind to make sure that you have the highest chance as possible of not bricking. That doesn't mean it can't happen, but again, where you can insulate and put stuff like that and put that random chance to your advantage, I really enjoy doing that. So that's the math behind the deck, and what I'm going to go ahead and do now is hop into a couple combos. Okay, we're going to talk about the first combo, starting with the next play button to throw Unicorn on the board. This will be 2 different combos just showcasing Unicorn. We will activate Unicorn's effect, using its effect to get a Theosis. We'll go ahead and use Theosis to get Fenrir. Fenrir's effect will trigger to get us an Arise Heart. We will add that to our hand. From there, we'll overlay into a copy of Shangri-Ira, and then we will go ahead and special summon the Arise Heart. Make sure you overlay Shangri-Ira first. Using Arise Heart, banishing the Big Bang from the deck to then trigger Big Bang. That will bring out a Kashtira here. And make sure, obviously, that you use Shangri-Ira first as Chainlink 1 to block a zone, because Rise Heart banishes 3 cards from the top of your opponent's deck face down, so you've currently blocked 1 zone. And then from there, overlay into the Mind Hacker. This is a pretty standard combo. We will detach 1. Again, rip a card from their extra deck face down, block another zone. Mind Hacker will trigger again, banishing up to 4 cards from their deck face down, and then Shangri-Ira will trigger again, blocking another zone. That is the pretty standard bread and butter single Unicorn combo, and then in the standby phase, we just go ahead and get another cache name of your choice, whatever you want. Typically, it will be a Fenrir. Okay, combo number 2 is going to, again, just showcase a single Unicorn combo. I wanted to showcase these 2 bread and butter combos because really all you're doing is building on Unicorn and adding additional extenders to get extra bodies on board. So again, we will start with the Unicorn, declare its effect, add Theosis, use Theosis, go ahead, get Fenrir. Fenrir effect will then trigger again to get our Rise Heart. Pretty standard, pretty similar. Go ahead and overlay both of those to make Shangri-Ira, then special the Rise Heart, getting rid of the Big Bang, and then going ahead and triggering the Big Bang and the Rise Heart. Obviously, we're blocking a zone, and then from there, we overlay into a Rise Heart. So what you'll have is typically a Shangri-Ira, a Rise Heart, because Kashtira Shangri-Ira activated its effect to block a zone. Apologies, that is not here, just because, again, the Rise Heart banishes 3 from the top of your opponent's deck face down, and then obviously getting the Fenrir back here from that piece, and that's pretty much it. It's a very basic bread and butter combo, leaving you on 3 pieces of interaction. Again, really, really solid. Everything else builds upon that. But with that said, we'll go ahead and showcase a better example of what it looks like to have other pieces in a live test hand. Okay, giving this guy a good shuffle just because everything was in order. And we'll do this as going first. I think that's the easiest way to showcase a test hand, solely because all of our going second cards are insane board breakers. So ideally, we're just breaking the board and doing something quite similar, or just going for a Zeus line. And I'd rather you understand how the deck actually functions to make your boards and make your plays. Picking apart an opponent's board is a little bit more straightforward, depending on the matchup that you're dealing with. So we'll give this a quick shuffle. Give it a quick cut, and we will go ahead and see what we're dealing with here. Try to adjust this just ever so slightly to try to keep everything in frame. It might not be perfectly possible, but we will have a Tactics, a Theosis, a Planet, a Arise Heart, and a Scare Clash. So this definitely gets you a lot, and go ahead and you can do pretty much anything you want here. So I'm just going to go ahead and showcase a few different things. So I'll go ahead and start with the Planet, using the Planet to obviously get the best card in the deck, Unicorn. slide our hand back just a bit. We'll go ahead, special unicorn, use its effect to get birth because we have opened the Theosis already. So we'll go ahead and add that from our deck to our hand. And then we'll go ahead and use the Theosis to get a copy of the Fenrir to our field. We'll go ahead and grab that. And then we'll go ahead and use Fenrir to search. Because we've already opened Scare and Arise, we're going to go ahead and add our final name in the form of Tier Cash. If you play Ogre, this would be a solid point to get that as well. So we'll go ahead and grab that. From there, I'll go ahead and special the Rise Heart. If you're really concerned with not forgetting to make Shangri-Ira first, then just make sure you make Shangri-Ira first. Obviously, we have the talents to go ahead and play through what we need. And the only other note is that if you're really concerned about playing through Nibiru, you could just hard overlay these two into an Arise Heart and pass. And that's kind of, pretty straightforward there. Or you could special this, make these two and do Shangri-Ira, and then get a unicorn, and then you're sitting on unicorn, Fenrir, planet pop, and then Shangri-Ira as well. So depending on how you want to play through Nib, that's a way you can do it. I am, of course, just going to showcase a full as possible board just because we are doing a basic test hand here. So we'll go ahead, and like I said before, again, overlay these two into a copy of Shangri-Ira. And then we can trigger the Arise Heart, making it level 7 by banishing a cash card from our deck, which will obviously be the Big Bang. So we'll go ahead and take that and get that banished. And trying to make sure this keeps in frame, I'm going to put it up here just in the corner so you can see it just a bit. That will then make this guy level 7, and we'll then be able to block a zone our opponent controls. So we've blocked one zone so far. And then we'll go ahead and use the Big Bang to get back the Fenrir. So now we have a Fenrir that we're working with, and we can do a few different things here. We are in a really good position. I'm just kind of glancing at our extra deck here. If you really want, you could technically go into double Mind Hacker, but to rip 2 cards out of their extra deck, you have a lot of different ways you can play. But we're going to start off just by going into a single Mind Hacker here. We'll go ahead, overlay these two, and just start with our standard Mind Hacker play. Use its effect, detaching a material, to then go ahead and look at our opponent's extra deck, rip a card, and block a second zone. And then this will trigger again in sequence with the Shangri-Ira to banish cards from the top of our opponent's deck face down, which would be 4, given we have banished 3 with the Rise Heart here, as well as the additional 1 from the Ablosis. So we're going to do another 4 face down and then block a third zone, which is actually really, really incredible. And then what we can do from here is I'm just thinking if there's a possibility to go ahead and block all zones. There probably is, but I might not be seeing it at the moment. But what I will go ahead and do from here is we're just going to go ahead and special the tier cache by doing that. We'll put it here, and then we can banish, let's do a Fenrir because we have the birth. So, and then we can mill 3 from the top of our deck, 3 or 2. I can't exactly remember. We can go ahead and send the top 3 cards of either player. So we'll go ahead and do ours just to see if we hit any worthy extenders. So we hit another Theosis, which is great. That's good to always just have in grave from there. And so now what we can do is if we want to block a 4th zone, we can most certainly do that by going ahead and making a second Mind Hacker, which is actually what I might be tempted to do here. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to go ahead and special. We'll activate Birth, and then we'll go ahead and special the, no, maybe we'll go ahead and use the Kashtira Scareclaw, special itself, and banish a copy of Theosis. And then we'll use Theosis' effect to add Big Bang, just in case we want the follow-up there. And then from here, what we can go ahead and do is overlay these two into a second Mind Hacker. So we'll go ahead and put that there. Use the other Mind Hacker. Again, it's just a regular once per turn. The banish from the top of the deck is not blocking a 4th zone on our opponent. So now we have either 4 monster zones locked or 4 spell trap zones locked. And then the Theosis would trigger if we wanted to add back a Fenrir. And then from here, what we could go ahead and do is activate Birth. And we could go ahead and normal the Fenrir since we have not normaled yet this turn. And then from there, we could do a few other things, but I feel pretty confident in this. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and make an Arise Heart here over the Fenrir. If you really wanted to try to go for that final zone, you could technically go ahead and do that we'll go ahead and showcase that. So what we will do, I believe, is we need an extra material. So what we can do is, since we have not special summoned back from birth, we can go ahead and special this back, and then we can overlay these two into a second copy of Kashtira, and then we can overlay that directly into a Rise Heart. I believe it doesn't have to be a non-exceeds any Kashtira monster. Yep. So now we can use its effect if we want. Detaching 3, these will all then get banished to banish a card on the field face down. So we could go ahead and just even banish birth, or if we wanted, we could set the tactics, let the tactics get banished face down. That would trigger our Kashtira, then blocking a 5th zone from our opponent. Then mandatory effects, Kashtira Rise Heart is going to trigger to attach at least 1 card. So we'll go ahead and just attach. Let's do a Fenrir, because why not? And then on our opponent's turn, they have 5 blocked zones, whether that's monsters or spell traps. And then we'll go ahead and special summon out a Fenrir during the standby phase with Kashtira. And that's just the basic of it. So we have an insane board. We've blocked either all 5 monster zones or all 5 spell trap zones. This is a really obvious idea of how disgusting the deck is, especially walking into a world with no interruptions. Yes, you are susceptible to cards like Lava Golem, all that kind of stuff, but that's the deck and kind of how, its weaknesses are. And you still have Big Bang, you're going to have Birth, you're going to have a lot of follow-up on the Crackback, but we did dedicate a lot of resources just to blocking 5 zones. But again, that means they can't Kurikara or things like that. Certain pieces don't work. So yeah, that's it for the test hand. That's it for the deck analysis. I hope you liked it. I hope you learned something. I hope this was helpful to you. Thank you again for watching this second episode of Meta Sheep. Next episode will come out next week, as well as regularly scheduled content on Sunday. Thank you all again so much for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Later.